Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Northern Virginia Technology Council for our virtual Masters of Leadership series, a new season of Leaders event. Please welcome Greg Baroni, the chairman of NVTC and the founder and CEO of Attain.
Thank you, Taryn. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's Masters of Leadership event featuring Chairman and CEO for General Electric, Larry Culp. As most of you know, NVTC is the trade association representing Northern Virginia technologies community. As one of the nation's preeminent and largest technology councils, we serve companies from all sectors of the industry, from small businesses and startups to Fortune 100 technology companies, as well as service providers, academic institutions, foreign embassies, nonprofit organizations, and government agencies. More than 500 members make up the NVTC membership and look to the organization as a resource for networking and educational opportunities, peer-to-peer communities, policy advocacy, industry promotion, fostering strategic partnerships, and branding the region as a major global technology center. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping matters to discuss here, and one of them is in connection with the Q&A. During the question and answer portion of today's session, please use the chat button found on the right side of your screen to submit any questions for Larry today as our featured speaker. As with all NVTC events, we will not be accepting any questions from the media. The Masters in Leadership, our Masters of Leadership series here, is made possible by our sponsors. First, Appian, our signature platinum sponsor. Then our platinum sponsors, Attain, Consumer Technology Association, and Mantech and Virginia Tech. Our silver sponsors, CNSI and Uninet. Our PR marketing advisor, Merit Group, and our media partners, Scoop News Group and Washington Technology. Thank you for your support. The NVTC business and academic partners support NVTC all year long in all of the programs we do, and please thank them as well please thank all of the following companies as well for their support. Booz Allen Hamilton, CIT, the Center for Innovative Technology, Consumer Technology Association, Dell Tech, Dominion Energy, George Mason University, Innova, KPMG, Maximus, Microsoft, Noblesse, Northrop Grumman, PenFed Credit Union, Pillsbury, PNC, SAIC, Venable, Verizon, Virginia Tech, and our policy advisor, Hunton Andrews Kurth. Thank you all for your support. Now I'd like to introduce our signature platinum sponsor and Appian founder and CEO, Matt Calkins, who will introduce our speaker, Larry Culp. Matt?
Thank you very much, Greg. It's great to be sponsoring this event. I'll take 1 minute to introduce Appian, and then I'll introduce our speaker. Appian's a local software company and proud to be a member of this Northern Virginia community. I founded this business 22 years ago with 3 friends here in McLean, and we're still here in McLean. Everything about the business is local. All of our funding came from this region, all of our board members as well. The Washington Post named us the #1 place to work in the Washington, D.C. area amongst large companies, and we were the #1 technology IPO of the year, the best performing technology IPO of the year in 2017. Appian's a leader in low code. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the new way to build applications. You draw a flow chart and it becomes an application. Instead of writing it line by line, you draw a picture. That's a lot faster, maybe 10 or 20 times faster. And that helps companies these days to change, right? Events are changing quickly. Companies have to keep up, but no company can move faster than its own software. So you've got to change your software to change your behavior, to keep up with the changing times. And Appian is helping organizations to transform. It's my honor this afternoon to introduce today's speaker, Larry Culp, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of General Electric. Larry is GE's 12th CEO and 11th Chairman. He joined the GE Board of Directors in April 2018 and became CEO in October of the same year. Prior to joining GE, Larry served as the President and CEO of Danaher Corporation from 2000 to 2014. During his tenure, the company increased both its revenues and its market cap 5-fold. Investors and analysts consistently ranked him as one of the top CEOs in the annual Institutional Investor Surveys. Harvard Business Review named Larry one of the top 50 CEOs in the world. Larry is a member and the immediate past chair of the Board of Visitors and Governors of his alma mater, Washington College. He also serves on the Wake Forest University Board of Trustees. Previously, Larry was a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, where he focused on leadership, strategy, and general management in the MBA and executive education programs. Before I turn it over to our moderator, Greg Baroni, I would like to introduce NVTC CEO Emeritus and Strategic Advisor, Bobby Kilberg, who will say a few words.
Larry, thank you very, very much for taking time during an incredibly hectic schedule to join us for this Masters of Leadership conversation. I personally appreciate your friendship and your participation. You have been an exceptional member of our community, and turning around GE is a huge task, which you have undertaken both with great rigor and, I might say, with great grace, an important and a somewhat rare combination. Thank you for all you do. Now, it's my pleasure to turn the floor back to Greg Baroni. In addition to being chairman of the NVTC board, most important thing in the world, right, Greg? And the founder and CEO of Attain, Greg is a longtime leader within the government, contracting, education, and nonprofit industries. With a focus on bold, innovative ideas, he's received many awards, including GovCon Executive of the Year, EY Entrepreneur of the Year, and he was named an NVTC Tech 100 Executive Honoree. Greg, I'll turn it off to you to kick off the fireside chat. Thank you all for being here. Greg?
Bobby, can't thank you enough. What a very generous introduction. But I think I stand before or sitting before a man that really deserves all those accolades, and that's Larry Culp. Larry, we're thrilled to have you joining us today. And as I understand, your roots are actually in this area.
Yep.
Why don't you share just a little bit about what it was like growing up? What were the most significant influences in you as you did? And of course, then your selection to go to a Maryland institution, the Washington College.
Sure. Well, Greg, happy to get into that. Matt, thank you for that very kind introduction. Bobby, good to be with you as always. Greg and I were joking earlier. Bobby had invited me. I think I expect most of the members of the council know that that's an invitation nobody refuses. And the only question was when we were going to be able to make this happen. So I'm glad to be back virtually in the 703. Greg, as you may know, I grew up on the wrong side of the river, as they say over in Rockville. But I count myself as a lifelong Washingtonian, and a lot of good memories. I think growing up, my parents ran a small business in Silver Spring, and I think from both my parents, I developed not only an interest in business, but a sense of what a small business was all about. And I reflect on those experiences or those lessons around the dinner table more often than you might think. I think my mother was the analytical one. I think my father was more the relationship manager of that partnership. But over time, the lessons they taught me clearly, I think, cultivated my interest in a business career, but also an appreciation that there are a lot of things that go in to making a business successful, let alone leading well. You mentioned my alma mater, Washington College. At the time, I was very keen to go to a small school simply because I had a sense that if I went someplace where I had a 500 or 1,000 students in the same class, I might well get lost. And the opportunity to stay relatively close to home, to be over on the Eastern Shore, a place that I still treasure and get to as much as I can, and to get a liberal arts education in a small, intimate environment was something that was just a great fit for me. And as I reflect back on that decision back in 1980, 81, another fortunate decision that I took that I think helped me grow as a person and ultimately as a leader.
That's great. Well, and thank you for sharing that with us, Larry. But then you go from Washington College to the big time, as we would say, to Harvard Business School. And I'm just curious, what led into that decision, and what were probably the biggest influences on you, and especially for some of the young people in our audience today. I think this may be of value to them.
Well, let's not forget there was a stop in between Chestertown, Maryland, and Boston, Massachusetts, down at 16th and K Street. When I graduated, I ended up going to Arthur Andersen. And you'll appreciate this, not on the audit side, but on the consulting side.
Uh-huh.
I think it was Time Magazine had just within that year named the personal computer, I think, the man of the year at that time. Ironically, the worst grade I received at Washington College was in programming. So I'm delighted to hear that Matt has simplified programming, and I might be able to get back into the business at some point. But I spent 3 years there. We did a good bit of work at the SEC, a little bit of work at the DoD, and I just loved it because it really gave me an opportunity not only to learn how to code and what all of that entailed early in my career, but also I had an opportunity to lead a couple of small teams. Now, it was obviously very early. I was quite young, but between those experiences and the opportunity to experience what I thought at the time was a phenomenal culture at Arthur Andersen, obviously the firm fell on hard times. That was just a terrific experience. But what I appreciated about myself during that time was I didn't feel like we had competition. I didn't feel like we had customers. And that maybe is a distinction without a difference, but serving the federal government's a little bit different than being in the fray every day. Of course, you have competitors and the government is the customer, but I think I was looking for something that was a little bit more transactional. So the opportunity to go to HBS, clearly one of those once in a lifetime opportunities, but the intent was to really see if that couldn't be a transition point for me towards something in general management. And obviously, I ended up with a couple of different general management jobs over my career, but that was really the intent. And fortunately, they gave me an opportunity to enroll back in the fall of '88.
That's terrific. It's interesting because as you reflect upon, we would call that the nascent era of government contracting during that period that you were actually serving the government client. You wouldn't recognize it now 30 plus years later because it's an intensely competitive field now. And you definitely know that is a customer set that's highly differentiated from the rest of the markets. In any event, let's move on. I'd like to hear a little bit about you. You then go to Danaher, and of course, I mean, you have an incredibly accomplished career during that time, and you become CEO at the age of 37. So tell us a little bit about first that journey up to that point. And here it is, a multi-billion-dollar company who turns to you, and they already have a market cap, I believe, at the time of about 20 billion. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, again, I joined Danaher in 1990 and was really attracted to the company in part because it was based in Washington. I was keen to get back to the DC area. I had the misfortune of trying to find a job back in 1990, which many of you will recall was right in the teeth of a downturn, particularly in industrial land. And I was really keen to get into an industrial business. I was also of the view that I wasn't necessarily going to follow the previous 10 years of HBS grads into paths that were well worn. So in the course of doing an independent job search, I fell upon Danaher, had heard a lot of good things about George Sherman, their recently hired CEO who'd been up in Baltimore at Black & Decker and had enjoyed a great deal of success there. And I basically cold called George and said, I'd like to come see you about a job. Turned out I was the first person that George's CEO hired at Danaher. He didn't bring me to Washington. He threw me up in a business called Veeder-Root in Hartford, Connecticut. Threw me into a marketing role simply because the opportunity they had in environmental instrumentation was the opportunity that he had deemed to be the most promising in the Danaher portfolio. And I remember, I think my mission was simply something along the lines of, don't let them screw it up. How's that for a job spec? But we moved to the Hartford area, jumped in with both feet, and we just had a tremendous team that I was fortunate to be a part of. They were in the process of looking for a new president of that business to make sure we were continuing to accelerate the performance. And it was shortly after my 30th birthday, George came to see me and said, the search has failed. We're going to put you in the job. And that gave me an opportunity very early on to fulfill the objective I had going to HBS, and that was to be a true general manager. We had tremendous success at Veeder-Root. I ended up getting a series of promotions, really as a result, probably got my unfair share of the credit for what we were doing with that business, growing, I think, organically something on the lines of 17, 18% a year for nearly a decade. And as George was approaching retirement in the 99-2000 period, there were a number of us under consideration. And rest assured, I didn't want George to retire. I didn't see myself as the lead candidate in any way. I was happy doing what I was doing with the teams that I was working with. But I was just floored when he gave me a call and said, "You're the next CEO, get ready." I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did, but then there in the spring of 2001, a fateful year, obviously, in a lot of ways, there I was trying to fill the shoes of a real legend.
That's amazing, Larry. And I'll tell you, what's more amazing is not only you accomplishing or getting to that point, it's what you accomplished during your tenure there. And I'm just going to take the time to read a couple of things I actually took notes on this because I thought, wow, it's during your tenure, 465% total shareholder return versus 105 for the S&P 500. Increasing market valuation or market value from 30 billion to 50 billion. I think the thing that stands out to me, because I think during that era, we started to hear a lot about conglomerates. And what I thought stood out in what I read about you in the background is how you redefined and refined the strategy for a successful conglomerate around developing what's called a tightly focused portfolio of business with adjacent and clear overlapping interests. And I think the other thing that stood out to me is how you went, in some way, you really complemented the organic with the inorganic, meaning divestitures along with acquisitions. Tell us a little bit about how did you arrive at this philosophy? How did you come to this?
Well, to be clear, it wasn't me alone, right? We had a great board of directors. Steve and Mitch Rails, our two founders, were intimately involved in the evolution of our strategy, in the implementation of it. We had a terrific leadership team. None of the other people who were up for that CEO job, Greg, left. They retired several years later, but we kept the team intact and kept running the plays that we were running. First of all, I would just share with you, we didn't use the C word. We always joke that conglomerate's a low multiple way to think about a business. We wanted no part of that. But early on, through the 90s, we did have a rather mixed and varied portfolio of businesses. We were manufacturing diesel engine truck brakes, and we were equipping water quality laboratories and a whole host of things in between. But I think what we found with the passage of time was that the fewer things that we did, trading breadth for depth, really helped us. It helped us drive organic growth. You mentioned that. It also helped us in a whole host of ways, particularly around capital allocation, right? A lot of companies, be they a Danaher that throws off a lot of cash or others that may borrow, really have a license to reinvest in the business, in my view, as opposed to paying a big dividend or buying back a lot of stock. You earn that license every day with how well you operate and how well you allocate capital. We put back all of the free cash flow that we generated. And remember, when I was there, I think we were converting our net income at about 120%. So 120% of our net income came in free cash every year. Just a tremendous performance on the part of the team. Investors allowed us to put that money back into the business because we were focused. Again, depth before breadth. We were running the business as well, and we never substituted inorganic growth for organic growth. We knew that organic growth was just as much a part of running the business as well. It's really a proof point, right? Because if you're growing in line or faster than your markets, you've got to be doing well by customers. That's the ultimate test. And by doing that, I think we not only generated the free cash that we did, but we secured that license day in, day out to continue to reinvest in the business.
That's thank you. So as you're having this great run, you're still relatively young at that point, and then you at that pretty relatively young age decide to step away to pursue other interests. What led to that decision, Larry? And then what did you end up? What were the highlights of this in between chapter before we get into GE? And we're gonna have a lot of fun with GE in just a minute.
Sure. Well, Greg, it was really a confluence of events. I was coming in on 25 years at the company. I was turning 50. I had a 25-year business school reunion. I'd been in the chair 13 going on 14 years. And I knew that at some point I would transition sooner than most people would expect, even our board perhaps, because I'd had an early start, and I had a long run. And at some point, I'm a big believer even today that at some point the organization can be too deferential, too respectful to the people in charge. And I thought that I could, at an early age, take advantage of the opportunity I'd been given at Danaher to transition. I knew I could go to the board with a number of outstanding options for them to choose from, and pass the baton, if you will, in the way that George had to me with confidence. The company would carry on, and they have. So I look back on that as my good fortune to be able to make that transition, but so thrilled and so proud of the way the team has performed since I said goodbye.
Okay, and so then let's kind of take this forward here, Larry. You're enjoying this time off as a senior lecturer at your alma mater, which is terrific, and probably getting a chance to take stock of what that next chapter would look like. And then you get recruited to join the board in April of 2018. I'd say, what led to that. And so whatever you could share a little bit about that piece of it, how do you end up taking on that role? It's an important demarcation in GE's history, because Jeff Emmelt at that time is stepping down, and John Flannery's coming in, and you're joining. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, Greg, to be clear, I was in the next chapter, right? When I left Danaher, I promise you, I had no intention of ever being employed full-time again. If I had wanted to be a public company CEO, I probably would have stayed where I was or transitioned sooner. But I was very keen to get into the classroom, start anew, and learn to teach. Unfortunately, HBS invited me up to do that. That's what I was doing in the fall. I spent a lot of time out west in Colorado in the winter skiing, and was spending a good bit of time in the spring and summer at Fenway Park. Life was good, more of a Boston than a McLean base, but that was in essence the plan. And from time to time, I snuck down to Costa Rica and caught a bunch of sailfish and blue marlin. So one of my colleagues, ironically, at HBS, Kevin Scherer, a GE alum, former Amgen CEO, had been talking to some of the GE board members and the new CEO, John Flannery. John was in the process of resetting the board. Kevin introduced the two of us. We hit it off. And John, to his credit, was really keen to have a board, albeit a board that was shrinking by about a third.
Right, from 18 to 12. That was a major move.
Yeah, no, it was, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But to John's credit, he wanted the experience that I'd had at Danaher, right, in terms of not only managing a portfolio of businesses, but going through tremendous change, critical capital allocation decisions in the room. And I thought John was somebody who really wanted the help. I thought he was somebody who I might be able to help in that fashion. And as you said in the introduction, I joined the board along with two others as part of that board transition in the spring a couple of years ago.
And so 6 months in, boom, you're named the CEO in October of 2018. Tell us a little bit, give us some insight into, that chapter for you, because that's a pretty major step for you.
Yes, and I had talked to a number of people about joining the board, and they said, just be careful. Don't let that be a slippery slope if you have no intention. And I said out loud, let alone to them privately, I have no intention. But over the course of that summer, as the new board was set and the challenges the company was facing became more clear, I think the board took the view that a little bit more experience in that CEO chair was probably what the company needed, right? And it was in no way, I think, a criticism of John. It was really just an analysis of where the company was at that point in time. The board came to me. I said no twice. Consulted a number of friends who said don't. But ultimately, it was a friend of mine. We were talking earlier about our friends at Brown Advisory. My good friend Truman Siemens up in Baltimore. Some of the council members may know Truman, who said you should do it. And I give Truman a bit of the credit here because as we talked it through, GE, an incredibly important company to our country, and I would argue the world. It was clear the team needed leadership, and I thought some of what I had done at Danaher would be relevant. My time on the board also gave me a perspective that this was probably the industrial challenge of my generation, if you will, right? And it's such a big challenge to unlock and unleash the value inherent in this business. You put all that together, and I came around and told the board that I would do it. And no regrets. I walked in the 1st of October, Greg, as if I had never left the role, and it's been just a very fast, 25 months now, 26 months.
27. I'm
but
counting.
It's been an honor.
Yep.
It's been a lot of work, but it's also been a joy to be with this team doing the work that we're doing.
So Larry, this is great, and I think there's some lessons of leadership here, because I'd like to kind of, if you don't mind, take your tenure there, that 27 months, talk about the first 3 months, what I call setting the table, the first 90 days, then talk about 2019, and then we're going to take apart 2020, because there was a lot you faced in 2020, as we all, those of us who are leaders and CEOs, we had our share of unanticipated, unprecedented activity. So let's talk a little bit about the first 90 days. What did you do? What was the most important agenda for you?
Sure. Well, Greg, that fourth quarter of 2018 went by in the blink of an eye, right? I mean, here I am walking in, first outsider ever. No one was really expecting it. I'd been on the board, 6 months. Some people think that when you're in the boardroom, you know everything. I think a lot of us know better, right? So there was just a whole host of people to meet, businesses to learn and understand at a deeper level, a vocabulary and an operating routine that was very different than the one that I was accustomed to at Danaher. We were dealing with some significant deleveraging issues. We had an IPO of our healthcare business on the boards, and we were trying to put together a budget for the following year. So everything was on the table, right, at the same time, and I was still trying to find my way around the company. So again, we tried to very quickly establish a routine. And this is where I think, having been in harness for 14 years, albeit at a different company, having managed a portfolio as opposed to a single line business, helped me begin to lay in some cadences that just reined in some of the activity and some of the chaos. And of course, the irony is, so much of what I laid in was what became instinctive over the course of 25 years at Danaher, much of which was modeled back in the early days on a lot of what we knew about GE.
Mm-hmm.
I remember George Sherman, the fellow who hired me and who I replaced as CEO, cut his teeth at GE under Jack Welch, right? So it's you follow that arc. It's interesting, but it was telling in that fourth quarter as we began to take action. Some of the folks who had been around a while would give me these knowing nods. We used to do that. We can do that again. And that gave me hope at a time when, you know, there were others who were obviously quite critical and perhaps without hope relative to where we were headed.
Sure. I mean, you know, obviously you spent your time at Danaher, 25 years in a private company. So here it is. Now you come into a public company setting, as we call it, the 13-week treadmill, that quarterly performance rigor. Like you said, Q4 2018 went by like that. How much time were you able to spend on some of the critical building blocks like people, strategic planning? How did you balance all of that?
Yes. Well, my principle, first and foremost, is it's all about the team, right? So despite all of the activity that goes on, I was really taking stock of the team, right? Not only in terms of whether we had, as my friend Jim Collins likes to say, the right people on the bus, but whether they were in the right seats. The company had really not gone through anything along the lines of a strategic planning process per se at the business unit level in a year or two. For me, that's always a critical exercise in the summer. You want to do it all the time, of course, but doing it in the summer ahead of a fall budget development, I think is a really good way to go about putting together the next 12 months of a financial plan. And we didn't have that. We came around in 2019 and laid in the first pass of a strategic plan cycle that has really served us well, I think, in subsequent years here. But it was really all about trying to sort through whether we were structured in the right way. We ended up making some significant changes in our power business, as you may be aware, really trying to run it less as one business and more at the individual P&L level. At the same time, we knew we had a deleveraging issue that was serious. So we made a decision to move away from the IPO of the healthcare business to a trade sale of our biopharma business, ironically, to Danaher. But it gave us an opportunity just this past year as COVID was taking shape to close that transaction. We got a $20 billion check from my friends on Pennsylvania Avenue, and that really helped us weather the storm that COVID represented. So a whole host of things. But again, Greg, it was then, as it is now, all about the team and making sure we've got the people that we need and they're ready to go.
Larry, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's team, it's people. You know, obviously, GE has an incredibly rich history that you referenced here. Jack Welch, you know, his passing in March of 2020, obviously a big event that you all went through. He put a lot of emphasis on people. You know, in fact, in his best-selling book, Straight from the Gut and Winning, he talks a lot about people, culture, and how negative culture can actually destroy a business. Yeah. I was wondering, how are you changing the culture of GE for the better, and how do you keep it improving? Yeah.
Well, Jack casts even today, I think, a large shadow at GE. I had the opportunity, Greg, the summer before Jack passed, to go out to his place in Nantucket and sit down and talk about things. It was the first time since I'd been hired that we had an opportunity to speak at length. And I'll remember vividly Jack leaning over and asking, "So Larry, how are you running GE?" And for somebody who had studied GE in business school, again, for all of us in the 90s, right, GE loomed large. For Jack Welch to lean over and ask me how I'm running a business, let alone the business he led for 20 years, that stays with you.
Sure.
His service in March was it was a love fest, right? So many people over years, all walks of life, clearly had been positively impacted by Jack. And I think I read all of his books, and that influenced the way we ran Danaher. Again, back to the team driving culture. There are a lot of wonderful aspects about the GE culture. I think the GE culture certainly tested not only with the various challenges that we inherited, but also with COVID. But I think what we've tried to do is also be very clear about the leadership behaviors that we want our leaders to embody in what they do day in, day out. In fact, I had 800 GE leaders from around the world, Greg, together earlier today for our kickoff meeting. And we talked a lot about those leadership behaviors. We talked about humility. We talked about transparency, and we talked about focus.
Yeah.
And interestingly, despite all the strengths that we have at the company, humility is probably not something, as one of our leaders said earlier today, we've talked a lot about. Transparency for me is telling it straight, as Jack would want, right? The good and the bad, and the bad sooner than not. And GE's a company with tremendous capabilities, let alone ambition, but that doesn't mean we can do everything, and to be folly to try, right? So we talk a lot about being clear, being focused. What are we going to do, and what are we not going to do? So those are the things that we're trying to drive culturally, but we're big believers that you just don't change culture from the bully pulpit, if the CEO bully pulpit, if you will. You really change culture over time with the way that you work. We talk a lot about the lean transformation, really borrowing from the Toyota production system, what we refer to at Danaher as the Danaher business system, to really change the way we do what we do day in, day out, and doing it with those lean principles, in my experience, ultimately really does embed humility. It makes transparency instinctive, and focus comes easily. So that's what we aim to do and how we're doing it.
Sure. Let me ask you, I know that during one of my prior lives here as a longtime tenured partner at KPMG, we had the benefit of doing pursuit of Malcolm Baldrige during our time there. And we actually studied GE's Session C and the values performance matrix. I'm curious, are you still using that accountability framework? And if so, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, Greg, with due respect to Michael J. Fox, we've had a little bit of Back to the Future, and what I mean in that regard, hopefully everybody knows what we're talking about. But if not, I think Jack was famous for really rating people on two dimensions: how good are your numbers, and are you walking the talk with respect to values? And if you're knocking the ball out of park with respect to the numbers, but you're a pain in the you-know-what, if you're not walking that talk, we don't have a lot of time for that, right? I think over time, the company, and I don't have all the history, I've only been here, not even 2.5 years, moved away from that, at least mechanically. But Kevin Cox, our CHRO, and I, and the rest of the leadership team have kind of gone back to that. So when we sit with the comp committee here in a couple of weeks, that will be part of how we talk about where we are. Performance is critical, certainly where we are today, vital, but we want to do it in the right way. We want to do it so we can sustain it over time. And talking about values, rating and compensating people for how well they live those values is just a vital part of that.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're known for being a values-driven leader, so it's terrific that Steve, you've, as you call it, Back to the Future, re-embraced it. I think for those of us who've been in leadership roles know that values performance matrix is really critical to getting the best leaders. And you referenced Jim Collins, and we call it that level 5 leader that has that unique blend of that indomitable will, if you will, that willing to win, that kind of Jack Welch kind, but also combined with humility.
Right.
So anyway, I'm sure that here it is, you're rolling along 15 months in, and March, it's Jack's passing, and then March also is the real hit for us for the first time that we really feel the impact of the coronavirus, COVID-19. How has it impacted you? And of course, you have one of your most high-performing segments really impacted by that, the aviation division. So tell us a little bit, how did you manage? What were the things that you thought were most important during that first 30 days, if you will?
Sure. Well, we have a large healthcare business, as you know, primarily in diagnostic imaging, a significant position in China. So we were beginning to get a sense of what was happening from, frankly, Wuhan back in January. But of course, we didn't extrapolate those signals into what has unfolded here around the world. Greg, we came into 2020, I think, with a very clear plan. We knew our deleveraging was on its way. The check was in the mail, if you will, from Danaher for the biopharma business. Operationally, the setup was such that we knew we had to continue to demonstrate progress on our turnarounds of both our power and renewables businesses. And we felt very confident we could do that. And we had time to do that, not only because the $20 billion was weeks away, but because our aviation business, our largest business, was really just trying to keep up with demand. And our healthcare business, despite the sale of biopharma, was going to be able to focus on really optimizing their operations without the distraction of the IPO. So we knew 2020 would be a bit of a year of transition. And if we could only cash that check and get 12 months of further progress on the turnarounds, we'd enter 2021 in good shape. And then, as you say, bam, right? The way we went at COVID in its simplest form was first to just embrace the reality, right? The world doesn't end very often. However, it's easy in those early days to think, well, this is temporary. I remember a number of folks thinking, I've seen this before. This is SARS. This will go away. Don't overreact. I think what we tried to do was embrace the reality, be somewhat conservative in thinking about how things could play out. We were quick to then, despite the plan we had laid in, redefine winning for 2020. And in some instances, that was just getting through the next day's worth of production. We have a very large service business, Greg. Over half our revenues are in services all around the world. With planes not flying, with plants being closed, borders being shut, it was tough to move people around. Just simply getting the next outage completed was winning, right, in a crisis situation like that. And once we had reset the plan, we really wanted to get back as quickly as we could to executing. We knew it was going to be a very different year than the one we had planned for. Hey, that's life. The best companies get on with things. And during the course of the second quarter, we saw a fall off in our aviation business that was just breathtaking, right? Global departures, a number I watch daily, was down the better part of 80%. Our healthcare business, as clinicians and practitioners were pivoting to the pandemic, stopped buying in a number of areas. Our core products, fortunately, we were on the front lines. We saw our activity, or our volume levels in products like ventilators and patient monitors soar. And while we were happy to help, and it was decent business, the rest of our business was under some pressure. Fortunately, our power and renewables businesses really were not impacted. We were anxious about that, and we were anxious all through the year, but they continued to make progress. We ended up taking a number of cost and cash actions. We've reduced costs by about $2 billion, cash to the tune of $3 billion. And slowly healthcare came back. Aviation's still down. Departures today were down north of 45% around the world, given the recent outbreaks here, right? So it was a year where we had to pivot quickly to a different plan, a different operating model, but in many respects, consistent with what we were doing. We talked about lean earlier. We talked about values. We tried not to come off of that at all. even strategic planning. You asked about that earlier. There was a moment in the spring where I thought, gosh, the last thing this team needs is to spend time thinking about where we're going to be in 5 years when the next 5 months are up for grabs, right? Fortunately, we said, we'll get through this. Let's do what we're doing. We took a good first pass last year. We can build on that. We will be here in 5 years, and we intend to be in a much better position. So those were the sorts of things that we did to get through 2020. And you may have seen the results that we put out on Tuesday. We ended up finishing well in the fourth quarter. 4.4 billion in cash gave us an opportunity to actually be free cash positive for the year. Lots of successes across the businesses. Still wrestling like we all are with this awful pandemic, but I couldn't be prouder of the way the GE team embraced that reality, reset the plan, and just got on with life.
Yeah, your performance last quarter was outstanding. I mean, cash was 2x what you had given in terms of guidance. It was just a hallmark for the things that you're doing. And I think for those of us who are listening to you today, we're taking notes in terms of your steps and the lessons that can be realized from what you've shared with us today. Let's talk. I know I'm coming to the end, and I know I have to be sensitive to make sure that I have one question coming on. Let me shift gears just real quickly to technology. I mean, we are the Technology Council, and sure, technology is rapidly transforming the way the world in which we live and work. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what role is it having, and how's it impacting GE, and which businesses are either leveraging it or being impacted by it most?
Right. Greg, one of the things that has been so enjoyable in my time here at GE is to see our technical prowess up close, right? When you look at our portfolio today and the leadership positions we enjoy relative to the energy transition, how we are leading in precision medicine, and the way we'll shape the future of flight, that's all rooted in long cycle breakthrough technology that has been and will continue to be under development and applied in those various businesses. So GE hasn't done what it's done for over a century, right? Back to Edison, without big bets, close to the market, close to customers, in a host of ways. Clearly, like many companies, we're trying to digitize everything that we can in that same way, whether it be our internal processes, the way we deliver products. We had a presentation earlier today with respect to how we're bringing AI into our women's health ultrasound business to help clinicians deliver better care, let alone in our service business, right? How we are using a host of different technologies to simplify and improve the way we inspect the blades on a wind turbine, something that's incredibly important in the face of the energy transition. So technology is at the heart of what we do at GE. It's one of the real strengths, again, over time. And as we move forward and we generate better results, we're very keen to make sure we're putting as much money back into the business in that way as we possibly can.
Thank you, Larry. And I'm going to shift gears here and allow my first question there, Dr. Karen Sanders from Virginia Tech, to kind of come in here and hopefully share a question with you here. Is that all right, Larry?
Please.
Hi, Mr. Culp. This is Karen Lilly Sanders. How are you today?
Very well, Dr. Sanders.
Just call me Karen. Okay, I work at Virginia Tech, and my job is Associate Vice Provost for College Access. And my question relates to workforce development. Recent reports indicate that there are more than 1 million unfilled technology-related jobs in the U.S., and approximately 60% of the unfilled manufacturing jobs are due to the shortage of applicants with adequate competence in science, technology, engineering, and math skills. In order to deliver employees with the knowledge, experience, professionalism, and soft skills preferred or required by business and industry, we must extend our outreach and recruitment to all communities across the United States. What are your recommendations on how K-12, higher education, and General Electric can work together to develop and train a competent and diverse technology and manufacturing workforce?
Dr. Sanders, it's an important topic for us. I mentioned the leadership call that we had earlier today. We were fortunate to have David Thomas, the president at Morehouse College, in with us for a while, talking about a number of these challenges that we have. I can't speak with any real expertise relative to K-12 and higher ed, but I know what we're trying to do at GE is to be clear about where our needs are,
yes,
where we can provide real value early on in the development of the next generation's education and skills.
yes,
For us, we can support our local communities, and we try to do that in areas where we have large presence, like
yes.
Cincinnati, like the Capital Region in New York, two examples. And we've got a host of GE people who are very keen to get into those programs
Yes.
On a both professional basis and as volunteers. To the extent that we can then create a bit of a pipeline, early career, be it a high school internship, certainly during
Yes.
college, it's a little bit easier. I hope we're providing opportunities for people not only to be exposed to those types of careers,
Yes.
but also give them a running start. I don't think certainly at GE we have the silver bullet as to
Right.
how to solve for that, but I do hope that over time will prove to be part of the solution.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Culp.
Thank you.
Larry, let me, we started going down this path, and let's continue it. I want to pull a thread. Clearly, the social unrest here this past spring shone a very bright light on DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, on the workforce. And I'm just curious, how did you respond during that? I mean, I know a number of the area leaders, we took a very sharp stance, and then also took some action internally in our organization. I'm curious, what did GE do?
Well, I think we were keen, Greg, to look first in the mirror and to understand where we were and how we could be better, right? So I think it was a time of listening and reflection, frankly, for the GE leadership team, both inside the company and outside the company. I think we all learned a great deal over the course of the spring and summer. Frankly, when I joined the company 2 years ago, and we talked through a whole host of the priorities given where the company was, this was not on that list. Not by design, but we had more pressing issues. But I think we clearly by Labor Day put this on the list, right, as a priority for the company, and hopefully not in a way that is popular and just following along, but because it's really important to GE. One of our young, diverse leaders put it very clearly to me: if we want to have the best team, we need to make sure we've got the best team coming from all walks of life, and they need to be comfortable at GE. GE's got to be a place where they're going to do their best work. So we reinstituted a chief diversity officer. We fortunately had a long-serving senior leader who has taken on that role. We put similar roles into each of our businesses. I think as importantly, they've been able to lead cross-functional efforts using some of our lean tools, root cause analysis and problem solving, to really get into the details of where do we have issues. Is it recruiting? Is it in early career development?
Mike, to go to Gary and let him go live?
And in doing so, what we're really trying to drive is action at the point of impact. Again, there are perhaps easier ways to create headlines. What we're trying to do is drive results at GE and if you will, tackle the diversity and inclusion agenda very much the way we're trying to tackle the rest of the agenda we've got across the company.
Sure. Larry, this is terrific. I mean, I'm sorry I thought I was on mute. I was reaching out to a colleague who wanted to ask a question here. But I think what you just indicated is probably the most important, and that is our response as a pillar of society, meaning leaders of American industry, cannot be perfunctory during this era. And so we were all like you, taking it very seriously, putting it, labeling it as a strategic priority. And it's great to see. And, I always believe that it's that diversity, and I don't mean just ethnic, it's geographic, it's of thought and style, that tension creates the spark of innovation. And I think we all as society benefit from having that diverse and inclusive culture. So it was great to hear your response. Let me turn to Gary Shapiro, who's the president and CEO of the Consumer Technology Association, and I'll let him ask his question.
Great.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Larry, for sharing your insights with us. GE has been a classic, iconic American brand for many years, and I very much enjoyed Jack Welch and listening to him and reading his books. And then he was followed by a series of leaders that seemed to switch the company around, and widows and orphans and others suffered, obviously, as the share price cratered. And in listening to them speak and reading what they said, it seemed that they shifted the policy of GE to be one that was using lobbyists and trying to get most of its money from the government, one way or the other. And I was wondering, under your leadership, if that government gives us the money first is still the approach, or are you going more private sector? Which way are you heading?
Well, Gary, I don't have all that history, so you're gonna be a little bit smarter about that I am. But I know when I walked in, I can't quote the exact figure, but the vast majority of what we do, again, in aviation and power and renewables and in healthcare in the U.S. and frankly the world over, is in the private sector. So we certainly have some important relationships. Our aviation business, of course, serves the Pentagon on a number of important platforms. But we're really trying to be very close to our customers, our private sector customers, first and foremost. So I don't see us as being overly focused on Washington as a source of funding or business. If there are opportunities there, of course, we're happy to serve, but that's not the GE that I know today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And I know we're coming to the top of the hour here. Any last question here would be anything you want to share with us for fun? Of course, we already learned that you're a Red Sox fan, and I already have plenty of comments in chat here about the New Yorkers responding to that. And for me, I'm a Dodgers fan, so all I know is it took 32 years to get to where we are, and I was glad to see us get a championship. Anything fun that you're going to be doing this summer?
Well, keep in mind, the Dodgers won because they stole Mookie Betts from us. We all know that to be true. Well, let's hope that come summertime, the combination of the vaccines and warmer weather have enabled us to get back to some semblance of normal. And if that's the case, I hope to have that fishing rod back in my hand and catch a couple of fish, at least on the Chesapeake, if not down in Costa Rica.
Well, Larry, we can't thank you enough on behalf of the Northern Virginia Technology Council and Bobby Kilberg and Jennifer Taylor. We thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful 2021. We're looking forward to great things from GE.
Greg, great being with you. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Larry and Greg, for that fascinating discussion. And thank you for attending today's virtual event. I hope to see you at future NVTC virtual events this winter. Please stay and network with fellow attendees in the social lounge. I hope you stay safe and healthy and have a great rest of your day.